to the cloud. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the San Francisco Doc Fest, the 20th anniversary of the festival. We're here to discuss one of our wonderful shorts programs, Local Legacies, program number 3. And today for the digital version of the festival, we're joined by Sophia. I'm so sorry, I already forgot how to pronounce it.
Foyer.
Thank you. So sorry. Everyone's already used to my awkwardness by now if they've been watching the other programs. And then we have Susan Dietrich, the space lady herself. We're so happy to have you here with us. And as a reminder, this program will also be presented live at the lovely Roxy Theater on June 5th at 1:30 p.m. So if you can make it in person, I hope to have the chance to see you. If not, we're glad to share this with you in the digital space. Sophia, Susan, I just feel so lucky to have you here with us and you get to share this story at the festival. And I guess just to dive in, Sophia, if you would like to talk about what drew you to telling Susan's story.
Sure. Yeah. I actually came across Susan's music first, and fully just was a fan, for lack of a better word. I just really loved the music. And I think what specifically kind of drew my attention was I noticed that the date of the album was, I thought it was like something from the past couple years. I forget the date, if it was like from like it acknowledged that it was music from the 70s and 80s. And I was just kind of blown away because it sounded so contemporary. And I was like, wow, this is really music that was very ahead of its time. So that is what initially sparked my interest to do a little bit of research. And Susan had done some interviews with different radio shows. And so I was reading a little bit about her life and was just like, like drawn because it is such a intriguing story. So I decided to email Susan and was really happy when she responded and was just open to talking to me. We hadn't, I think I mentioned I was a filmmaker, but, we just wanted to talk at first. And I was already driving across the country from New York to San Francisco to move there. And so we made plans for me to drive through Colorado for us to meet up. And at least how I felt, like we connected like immediately. We were having some really, I think, intimate conversations and personal conversations. And something I realized was that maybe there was another side to the, story that was posted online, that there were a lot of nuances and hardships that I think get mentioned in some of your interviews, Susan, but I feel like there were other, I just sensed that there was kind of like another side to the story as well that you maybe were dealing with in the moment, and thought that was really interesting because despite our age difference and, where we, growing up on different sides of the country, us both being female artists had a lot in common. So we had a lot to talk about. And then from there, we just talked a lot on the phone. And honestly, I think the film ended up being like a representation of a different like strings of conversations we were having just about being a female artist, about the extraterrestrial, a lot of our shared interests, and just a lot of the really incredible aspects of Susan's life that she was sharing with me. So yeah, that's just how the film came about.
I love it so much. And Susan, there's something so iconic about the imagery of your career, from, your busking days, your, having your synth set up. I was lucky enough to get to buy a Space Lady t-shirt from your grandson when I saw you play at the Verdi Club. But I love, as Sophia is saying, that there's more than just this one iconic image, that you're a person who has gone through so much throughout your life. And obviously, like, your career has evolved with that, from starting off busking in San Francisco to where you are now in Colorado and able to uh, when hopefully when things return to some semblance of life, maybe I hope touring at places like the Verity. Like I said, I was going to see you at Zebulon in LA, so you're at some pretty awesome venues. But can you talk a little bit about the process from your perspective of working with Sophia and allowing your
Hmm.
story to be opened up and told, and what that platform feels like for you?
Well, I know, as always, I had some apprehension about meeting a professional filmmaker who wanted to focus on me. And I was feeling inadequate and unprepared. And like, what in the world can I mean to younger generations, plural, at this point in my life and career? But when I met Sophie, she was so pure and so just relatable and empathetic and perceptive and intelligent and gifted. And I felt completely honored and blown away that she just absolutely um, disarmed me, I guess you would say. I had no pretenses because she didn't. And we just connected on a very soulful level. And we still do. We're just the best of friends, even though we're so far apart physically. And, there's so much going on in each of our lives that we just touch base every so often, like today. And it's always an overwhelming pleasure to see her beautiful face and hear her kind voice and loving words. And I just, it was when she said this was happening, I made every effort to get here because I knew it would be really special. And I can't thank you
Yeah.
enough, Sophie,
Well, that means a lot to me.
reaching out to me like you have.
Of course, yes. This film definitely feels like it was born out of just friendship, which I love.
Mhm.
I think that there's something so beautiful and intimate about being able to share your art, and not necessarily for commercial purposes, because I think commercialization does make things feel a little bit different. But when you really are wearing your heart on your sleeve in many ways, like when I think for you, Susan, your transition from doing covers to original works, like Synthesize Me, that's a film that I feel like, or excuse me, a song that I feel like you can see the heart there, you can see the person behind it. And when you share your stories through filmmaking, it's just another peeling of that artichoke or that onion to get to the heart of who we are. And Sophia, I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about what it felt like to peel this back. For a lot of people, uh Space Lady is so important to us. uh
Mhm.
and there's something interesting when you move beyond that iconography to the person who they really are, and it feels just so special to get to share that. So what was that like for you to kind of
Yeah,
find your way in?
absolutely. Absolutely. I remember actually when we did first, when I proposed more formally making the film together, Susan said something similar to what you said today, which was that you were honored that I wanted to make a film about you, which was really mind-blowing to me because I felt so honored that you were interested, to make a film with me as well, because it truly what is, I think, like full collaboration. We're like taking this orb of creativity and bouncing back and forth, and it was evolving as it was going. Even when we were there together, I made a trip before that to come visit and be with you in person, and I got to see you at a couple different shows as well. And the whole time it was just evolving. And I knew very well that I wasn't working with someone who was like a creative talent that people didn't know. This was somebody that people knew and were, love and were expecting to be, something, and knew the story that they had, that Susan had shared previously. So there was a lot of pressure to get it right. And I think even working in documentary with anyone really, but especially with Susan, the more you get to know somebody and the more stories you hear and the details of what makes somebody special and so complex and unique, it's like, okay, I have to, I want to share this, what I share with this person with other people. How do I do that in a 15-minute film? It feels impossible. And the first cut of the film was something where I was like, I'm just going to put everything that I love into it and, not care about how long it is, was something near 40 minutes. And then having to cut the stories away was like, I don't, how can I do this accurately without sharing everything? And I think that is just like the struggle of making a film. And I think I ended up just focusing on trying to capture the essence of the feeling of what we, of us being together, and allude to some of the struggles and, personal and psychological struggles that we talked about, and dilemmas and contradictions and, everything, instead of like sharing all the details, just kind of trying to capture what that feeling was like for being together and being with Susan, because it otherwise would have been impossible. And I also remember when we were at the Mini Maker Fair together, and I met your son and your daughter, and your son said something to me like do right by my mom. And I was like, I hope I will.
He only knew.
Yeah. But it, in many ways, because of how amazing and complex Susan is, it made it that much harder to feel like the film was going to be accurate and adequate enough.
I have to laugh at you referring to me as a complex person because I feel more like a simpleton more often than not. And I just work from the seat of my pants, basically. Like lately, since the shutdown and all my tours and gigs were canceled, I've just been going to the city park and busking with my guitar, and I'm just back to square one almost, because I don't know how to play guitar. I'm just learning, and yeah. But it's kind of lovely to play for real people again, and not have the formality of touring or being on stage, but just being at eye level with people, and really kind of just being a beginner.
I love that.
I almost feel like the space lady has returned to her planet, wherever that may be, and I'm just a country girl trying to make it in the world again. So I don't feel too complex these days. Thank you.
I think there is something interesting to think about as the world evolves and we continue to feel safer and going out and interacting with people, that there are a lot of new beginnings that are happening. And I think that it's lovely to hear that you feel like you're having a different phase. But looking backwards, could you talk about what San Francisco meant to you in terms of your career? I mean, obviously it's a hard place in a lot of ways, but it's also strange and beautiful and very, very weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was certainly intimidated by San Francisco when I arrived in 1967 in the heart of the Haight-Ashbury, and flower power was just bursting into full bloom. And here I was from a tiny town in rural Colorado. And yet it was a positive influence. I was overwhelmed and lost and traumatized, I guess, really culture shocked. But it overall had a tremendously positive and utopian impression on me, how things could be in our naivete as hippies back in the days before everything kind of spiraled into the world we live in today. It's just, it was innocent, and yet it seemed so complex, again, to use that word again, and futuristic, and again, blissfully utopic. And I tried to carry that feeling into my art as best I could and convey a positive message that positive change is possible. And what else do we have to work with but the hope and commitment to that ideal? It seems to get harder by the day, by the minute, to believe in it, especially with climate collapse being really apparent, more and more apparent every year. I think that's the issue of the day, and it is like an umbrella to all the other issues we're dealing with.
I agree. I mean, the way that our climate exists drives so many of the ways that we're able to live. And that is our greatest challenge moving forward. And I think that having art that can help people tap into that is really important, because sometimes a beautifully crafted film or a song can help change the hearts and minds more than somebody lecturing at you. And I think that that's something that makes these mediums really important. With that being said, Sophia, do you want to talk about what you hope the audiences take away when they share Susan's story that you crafted?
Yeah, there's a lot. I just, simply in the most simple way, hope that the, I guess, aspect of the story that, as much as Susan is admired that she went through so many hardships and there are so many nuances, and the fact that you're still growing and becoming a new person, and your art wasn't just from that period of time, like you're still making work now and learning new things and writing new songs and very much developing. Like, I think there's this idea that all that really gets done for musicians specifically when you're younger, but there's been so much change and growth, and I just think it's really beautiful that you were able to get a platform and the recognition that you deserve, because I also think it's I say, like, when I say that you were rediscovered, I do quotes, because you realize so many people really, you were a known person in San Francisco, which is something I realized when we did the show at the Verity Club, and so many people there I talked to who were like, I used to see her going on my way to work through the Castro, and that always brightened my day, because so many of my friends were dying of AIDS, and I was going through a lot, and to see Susan out on the street always made me happy. And I just, you meant and mean so much to people. I think it's amazing that, like you said, that you're continuing to be relatable and connect with younger generations. But yeah, I just wanted to share that aspect of your life I mean, I think you in many ways already are doing that by continuing to tour and sharing your new music and people all around the world. So you're, you know, everyone knows you and knows that. But I just felt lucky to share a little bit of the intimacy of what your life is like at home when you're not out all over the world on huge stages, what that is like for you.
Pretty ordinary.
But also
My
I think,
perspective,
go ahead.
ordinary as dirt, from my perspective.
I thought it
But,
was
you
so
know,
interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
you know, inspiration is transcendental. I don't know where it comes from, but it transcends us as individuals and brings us to heights that we can't fathom.
Mm.
I mean, the fact that you wanted to focus on me is enough of a mind blower, you know, to begin with. And you felt the same way. It was just a meeting of the minds and souls.
Yeah.
Creative.
I found the fact that you ended up moving back to Colorado really interesting. As ordinary as I feel like you like to say it is, it's I think what was is the like breeding ground for so much of the contemplation that you've been able to do the past couple decades in a way, because a lot of the, I think, initial difficulties that you faced with identity, and correct me if I'm wrong, began with your early life being a young woman in Colorado with your family and just what growing up in that landscape did, and then ending up in Colorado and having such a whirlwind of a life, and then ending up back in essentially your hometown, even though you were living in the town next door, that had to be such a strange, complex experience, as quiet and simple as the prairies seem to be. They're so, like, I think immense just by carrying your life with them.
Well, in as much as it was really challenging to grow up in a town of very ultra conservative rednecks, cowboys and farmers, ranchers and farmers here. And my parents were professionals. They had, you know, they had college educations, and it was just happenstance of my dad's job that we ended up here. But I think it had such a profound influence in other ways, just because of the wide open spaces, the vast expanse of prairie. I say the prairie is my ocean, because you can just go a few miles out of town and your spirit can soar to the heights. In fact, as a kid, I used to fly my kite out there. That was one of my great joys of childhood, was flying a kite where there were no, you know, electrical wires or buildings or anything, and it would literally go so high it would disappear if you had enough strength. And my spirit would soar with it. And I think the peace and quiet and solitude that you can find in the wilderness, whether it's prairie or forest or ocean, is where we get our nourishment, our creative spirit. I don't know, for me, that's what nourishes me. And coming back after so many years in first Boston and then San Francisco, where it was just getting more and more congested by the year, it was a huge relief. And I just kind of was able to relax and breathe again and feel unpressured. And that's where my creative spirit thrives, that kind of environment. And I wish it on every single artist in the world.
I think it's interesting that earlier you said something about that you're as ordinary as dirt, which is funny because when you think about that statement, dirt is where it all begins. It's the harbinger of life and seedlings and where we're able to grow.
very
And
percent. Yeah.
when you think about this concept of space, right? Going from somewhere like San Francisco to Colorado, I think you understand what the premium is when you're in San Francisco, because you're
Mhm.
literally paying out the ears to be able
Mhm.
to be there. And anywhere in California, especially, that there is something that becomes more difficult to maintain your creative spirit.
Mhm.
But I think so much about what that city is resilience too, where you're able to overcome, and find what works for you and what doesn't. And having the strength to make those life changes is really important.
Mhm.
I think we're gonna wrap up. But as we leave, Susan, do you want to say anything that you hope that folks sharing your story will take away?
Well, I mentioned climate collapse, and I've been learning a lot about the possibilities we have, and I know it's hard to face the reality that we're going to have to use technology to free ourselves, to be able to draw down the carbon we've already emitted into the atmosphere. But that's our only hope. It's like, if I may use the analogy that's been used many times, the earth floating in a bathtub that's slowly filling to the brim and now beginning to overflow. We can turn off the faucet, but we're still drowning unless we pull the plug. So I don't want to leave a despairing message, but we do have to work really, really fast, and we have to
Call
raise
to
our
action.
awareness to be proactive and know that it can be done. We do have the technology, and we must act now to save this planet for future generations of all species. Call it home. That's a message from the space lady.
That's
She
so
does
special.
for me still.
Thank you so much, Sophia, for bringing a platform to this story. And Susan, just thank you for everything. You mean so much to so many of us, and it's very, very special to get to share this with the both of you. And thank you to the audience for sharing this with us also.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Sophie.
Thank you for having us a part of this program.